In the sea of third-party game developers, few have ever had the same longevity or brand recognition as Capcom. They've produced some of the biggest franchises ever. With Street Fighter, they took the crown for years as the top of the fighting game genre. They helped pioneer survival horror with their nightmare-inducing romps through Raccoon City in Resident Evil. And in the early days of the Nintendo Entertainment System, Capcom managed to stand out in the world of classic mascot titles with the Blue Bomber himself, Mega Man. Known as Rockman in Japan, Mega Man was all about running, jumping, and shooting. The games stood out from the rest of the NES titles. It was a simple series. Mega Man has to take on 8, or in the case of the original game, 6 bosses called Robot Masters, and then move on to face the evil Dr. Wily. The big thing that really made these games stand out was that you could choose the order in which you took on the bosses. That was something unique that is a staple of the series to this day. And the Mega Man series proved to be quite successful for Capcom. Moving forward into the 90s, we were introduced to the 16-bit generation of consoles. Graphics took a pretty big leap ahead and gaming became more complex. Games moved faster, and everything was edgier, thanks in large to Nintendo's biggest competitor, Sega. Capcom were extremely active in the 16-bit era, and given the success of Mega Man, they were certain to bring the franchise to the new generation of consoles. But they didn't just bring Mega Man forward for the Super Nintendo. They went a step further and brought a whole new generation for the Blue Bomber. Set 100 years after the events of the original series, on the Super Nintendo, the world was introduced to Mega Man X. I played the first 3 Mega Man titles as a kid, and Mega Man 2 is still among my favorite video games. So when my family went to Toys R Us back in 1994, my brother and I made sure that we brought home Mega Man X. The moment I saw the box art, seeing Mega Man in an all-new white and blue armor, I just knew that I had to play this game. I didn't know then that this was the start of a new series. I just knew that it was incredible and felt like a massive step forward for the franchise. From the moment you turn the game on, it's impressive. The world is vibrant and feels alive. While I've been making pretty massive videos as of late, I have no idea as I'm writing this exactly where the video is going to go. But I've been dying to talk about this game. So I really hope that you'll join me as we dive into the title that launched a massive spin-off franchise. It's not too often that a company gets a series perfect on the first game, but Capcom knocked it completely out of the park with this one. I'm the Unhinged Gamer, and this is my Mega Man X Retrospective. Keiji Inafune is known as the father of Mega Man. He is responsible largely for steering the Mega Man ship since its inception back in 1987. In the early 90s, Capcom put the team that had been working on the Mega Man series on the task of creating a new spin-off franchise for the series. They wanted this one to be suited for the Super Famicom. Inafune worked with his team on creating something new and exciting for this new Mega Man spin-off series. They were inspired by the rising popularity of role-playing games at the time and wanted to add more depth to the game. The team took everything that had made Mega Man as a franchise special and built on that to evolve this new series. Inafune also created a new hero to replace Mega Man. He wanted something fresh, something different, an edgier hero for the new decade. This led to the creation of Zero, a red and white warrior with long blonde hair. Unfortunately, the heads at Capcom were not as sold on the idea of a totally new hero as Inafune was, worrying that the fan reaction to a drastic shift away from the Blue Bomber would be a negative one.
What am I fighting for?
The decision was ultimately made to go with a character more similar to the original hero. X was designed to look similar to the classic Rock or Mega Man. He had the same blue hues that the fans would recognize, and if you didn't pay attention to the story at all, you could believe that this was the same character with a visual upgrade. But this character was again an evolution. He had more abilities, but started out with a smaller energy bar. X is also portrayed to be more serious than the original Mega Man in the story that we're given. He is a new Mega Man that keeps just enough similarities to the original to keep fans from having too much confusion about who the main hero is. The original series also had bosses called Robot Masters. They were all men. I mean, seriously. There was Bomb Man, Cut Man, Wood Man, Heat Man, Fireman, who would have been terrible at the actual occupation of the same name, but the new series decided to come up with a drastically more radical design for its bosses. Now we were facing bosses designed after animals, giving them far more dynamic appearances from the original Robot Masters. And at the core of this new game was its main antagonist, Sigma. See, the original big bad, Dr. Wily, was pretty popular among fans of the series, with some qualities that made him comedic and likable. Sigma, on the other hand, was meant to do away with all of that. He was a no-nonsense villain, pure evil. And Sigma wanted to destroy humanity and create a new world where only Reploids would thrive. He's a far more complex villain than Wily was, where Wily was just an old man bent on world domination in the classic line of villain tropes. This series was far more serious than the original Mega Man. Mega Man X takes place about 100 years after the events of the original Mega Man series wrapped up. X was created by Dr. Light, an evolution of the robots that he had made before. He was modeled to look similar to Rock, or Mega Man, but with some massive upgrades to his programming and design. X was the first robot ever to be given free will, a truly sentient artificial intelligence. In the past, even the most intricately designed robots had failsafes in them that would limit what they could or couldn't do right into their programming. X was able to decide right and wrong, to think for himself. He could make decisions and feel emotion. This was well beyond anything that the world had ever seen. But Light knew that designing X like this was incredibly risky. So he had X locked away to have his systems tested repeatedly, wanting to make sure that it would be safe to unveil this new generation robot to the world. The testing would take around 30 years, but Dr. Light was already an old man, and he died before the testing was finished. We're not sure exactly what happened after that, But we know that the facility that Dr. Light operated ended up buried, left to be forgotten to time. Years later, Dr. Kane, an archaeologist, found the facility, and inside, he discovered X. There's no mention in the series about the original Mega Man or the Robot Masters, so it may be safe to assume that they were all decommissioned or destroyed, left to be forgotten along with the good doctor. But Dr. Kane woke up X and spent some time studying him, amazed by the technology within. He learned how to duplicate the programming, and in an incredibly nearsighted decision, began creating new robots using X's programming and calling them Reploids. Robots with free will. And along with free will, the Reploids would develop their own unique personalities. And as such, some decided that being good was not exactly what they wanted. Those who chose to be criminals were labeled as Maverick, a term to mark outlaw Reploids. Kane created Sigma to lead a group of Maverick hunters to take care of these rogue Reploids. But then something goes terribly wrong. Sigma turns Maverick, taking several of the Maverick hunters with him. He has decided that humans are holding Reploids back and intends to rid the world of humans so that his people can thrive and grow. He leads the Mavericks on a massive attack on the city against the humans, and the Mavericks quickly come to overpower everybody. X joins the Maverick Hunters, now led by a powerful warrior named Zero, and they try to take the fight to Sigma and his forces. Things look bleak, but the two have to try something, anything, to save humanity. Now, we learn a lot more in later entries of the series, but for today, we're focusing on the original. The lore of this series continues to get deeper from game to game, and it goes off the rails after the 5th entry. But who knows? We may get to those in the future. But for now, here's what we need to know. Sigma is the big bad of this game. He's got powerful Mavericks helping him to take control of the planet, and X will be joining the fight alongside a new hero named Zero to try to take them down. And with that, let's go ahead and jump into the game. We open things up with X on a highway. Now this is already a massive change from the original series. See, in the classic games, you start out on a level select screen, where you get to choose what boss to attempt. Now, we've got a tutorial stage, which had never been done in any of the Mega Man games prior to this one. As X moves along, he takes on Sigma's forces there, trying to liberate the city. The destruction here is insane. The world looks like it's been ravaged by war, pulling you deeper into the setting. We can learn here how to charge our shots by holding down the shoot button, which is also a pretty big change for this new series. This buster can really pack a punch. Shortly after you get into the highway stage, X runs into a hovering enemy that looks like a flying bee or hornet. Now once it's taken down, the platform below falls, and the only way out is to use another new ability to the series, the wall jump. Now this simple addition to the game transforms the way that we play Mega Man. Traversal can now be so much more detailed than ever before thanks to this ability, giving X much more mobility than the previous Mega Man. Eventually, you'll get to the end of the stage where a flying carrier drops a Maverick in a massive mobile armor. This is vile. He absolutely despises X and revels in the chance to take him out. Now this is an unwinnable battle. No matter what you do, he will eventually wear you down and capture X. Then, just as hope is fading, you can hear energy building from off screen. Then a blast comes through that frees X, taking the arm off of the mobile armor and leading Vile to retreat as Zero, the leader of the Maverick Hunters and close friend to X, saves the day. X laments that he is not powerful enough, showing self-doubt, but Zero encourages him to keep fighting and to get stronger. The big brother dynamic here shows a deeper layer of depth to this game than we're used to for the series. X is not just the Blue Bomber 2.0. He's not sure who he is, but he knows he has to fight. He's got someone to look up to and to strive to be like. Now, as a kid, I was blown away by Zero. He was just so cool. I felt that drive to be better and to try to become as powerful as he was. The game tells you that it's possible and encourages you to put time into it. Mega Man X wants you to explore all of the secrets that it holds. And from here, we get to finally move on to a classic sight, the boss select screen. Now, the boss screen in Mega Man X absolutely blew my mind as a kid. There's so much more here than I was used to. In the original series, you basically just saw an image of the boss and that was it. I remember thinking it was really cool back in Mega Man 3 when Rock would actually look in the direction of the bosses that you wanted to take on. But here, there's 3 different screens available. The bosses still line the screen, but now there's a central window. You can get a brief teaser screen that gives you at least a small idea of what the level's like, sharing a single screenshot from the levels. But then again, there's also a statistics screen giving you the name of each boss as well as some details about them, including the names of some of their attacks. I love that I can get some details of what to expect from each. It feels as if the Maverick Hunters have their files out on each of the Mavericks, and you're looking over the files before you choose your targets. Then, there's the most immersive change to the game so far. There is a world map showing the locations of the 8 Mavericks. This lets you see how the levels are all connected in the world. They aren't just random levels built for the player. They are locations in this world that you're going to try and save. And this plays into even more of what the game has going for it, which we'll get into shortly. The bosses here maintain the traditional rock, paper, scissors format that the franchise is known for. Now, once you defeat your first boss, you'll be able to get in on that action. And some of the weaknesses basically break these battles. Though it can be fun to feel like a total badass when you're shredding the Mavericks. The great thing here is that none of these bosses are so difficult that you can't figure out a strategy to take them on with just the X-Buster. Some of the bosses are borderline easy if you just pay attention to their patterns. Now, I've never seen much in the complaint department for this game, but I could see how someone could argue that it was a little bit too easy. And that argument becomes especially valid if you're playing through the game knowing the weaknesses of each boss. And speaking of the bosses, the Mavericks are a far cry from the bosses in the original series. Not to knock any of the older bosses, I love those games, but the Mavericks were animals, and not just metaphorically speaking. While a few of them are similar in size to Mega Man, these bosses come in all different shapes and sizes, adding even more variety to this game. For example, the first time that I ever saw Sparkman drill, I got clobbered by this massive Maverick. He can hit like a truck. He climbs all over the ceiling like a beast, and it was extremely intimidating to me as a kid. I didn't know what to do and I panicked, spending more time running from him than fighting him. It wasn't until I learned a bit later that his weakness was shotgun ice that I realized how you could truly cripple this guy, making the boss laughable. Speaking of the boss, let's talk a bit about his level as well and get into the interconnectivity that I mentioned earlier. Sparkman Drill is in charge of the power plant area. The opening of the level is filled with charged tubes that shoot electric currents along them. It's an exciting level, but if you've already defeated Storm Eagle, who you face in the top of a wrecked aircraft, that craft crashes into Mandrill's plant, causing massive damage. So now, his level no longer has the current charges, but the lights are flickering on and off as the power circuits are heavily damaged. It's a fun way to transform the world. And speaking of Storm Eagle, I have to say that he is one of my favorite bosses in the entire franchise. He just looks cool. You're moving through the tops of buildings in the city, maybe in an airport of some sort. You go through towers, and they took a lot of care to show off what the franchise could do here. It was incredible the first time that you take out the enemy in the top of this tower, only for the explosion to blow all of the windows out. Once you reach the end of the stage, you jump across platforms onto a massive aircraft before destroying the top of it as Storm Eagle emerges. There's no walls here, no ceiling, just a platform in the sky, and he will dive bomb after you. It's an exciting fight, having to dodge all over this area to get away from it, forcing you to dash around and look for opportunities to fire shots. And if you've gotten the chameleon sting already, you can do some massive damage to it, though it's not nearly as crippling a weakness as Sparkman Drill had. This fight, to me, is peak Mega Man boss fighting. But as you can see from the fight, something is different here. So let's jump up north and visit the legitimate easiest and least intimidating Maverick in the game, Chill Penguin. This level is pretty obviously meant to be the first one that you take on, though of course that choice is completely up to you. Chill Penguin is in a snow stage, dealing with lumberjacks and snow bunnies bouncing around. Now it's not too difficult, but they can get some shots in on you if you aren't careful. Eventually, X will run into the cover of a cave, making short work of bats and rolling spike wheels as you climb your way up the ledge onto a path where a capsule comes up from the ground, and we get introduced to one of the massive changes to the series that truly makes X special. Inside the capsule is a hologram message from Dr. Light. The good doctor may be long gone, but his hope, his spirit lingers even all these years later. This message is directly for X. Light had hoped that X would be able to have a peaceful existence, but he knew that the chances were slim. So Dr. Light constructed new armor for his creation and separated it into pieces scattered throughout the world. Inafune had been inspired heavily by role-playing games, and he wanted to add his own progression elements to the X series. And this came in the form of these power-ups to X's armor. It was incredible the first time I saw Light show up like this, feeling a sense of hope and sadness. X knows who he is, but he never got to know him. But here, he was given an incredible upgrade, the dash boots. Now, you could dash through the levels, allowing you to move much faster and dodge enemies a lot easier. The dash boots even allow X a considerable boost when launching off of walls, giving him extra momentum as he leaped through the air. This one change drastically transforms the way that we play the game. Now, before we move forward, we should take a short detour back to Storm Eagle's stage. It has a secret of its own that I left out earlier. But if you make your way off the beaten path, you'll be able to dash jump to another capsule from Dr. Light. This capsule gives X an enhancement to his helmet, allowing him to break blocks with his head. Now, it's not the most useful ability, but I guess they needed to give him something here. And they do use this ability to help you unlock a few other hidden secrets later in the game. So now back to Chill Penguin's stage. After getting the dash boots, X moves forward, pressing on through the frozen level. You even briefly get a chance to use ride armor similar to what Vile had used when trashing X on the highway. It feels great to have this power, and you can get an understanding of why he was able to win so easily. But unfortunately, it doesn't last, and X soon finds Chill Penguin's lair. His design just looked like the least intimidating. Well, at least to me it did. So I always felt like he was meant to be the first enemy of the game. His battle's pretty easy too. Just dodge a bit and you can get so many openings at him. But if you were crazy and you took out Flame Mammoth beforehand, you can use his weapon, the Fire Wave, to completely engulf Chill Penguin in flames. It's a pretty wild thing to see, watching this robot recoil as it's engulfed in an inferno. But once you take him down, you get the shotgun ice and can move on to your next enemy. And while that shotgun ice weapon is the best for old Sparky, let's go check out the game's Fiery Maverick. Flame Mammoth is absolutely massive. His level is a factory with conveyor belts, miners, and a ton of fire/lava. His level is one of the more intimidating stages in the game, trying to keep from being burned to a crisp as you progress. But this level also has its secrets. Early in the level, there's a section that's hard to reach of breakable blocks. Now, if you already have the helmet upgrade and the dash boots, X can just barely reach the area and bust his way up through the ceiling to find the third of the Dr. Light upgrades. And next to the boots, this is the best of the bunch. It's an enhancement to your X-Buster, allowing you to charge up much more powerful blasts. This even extends to the boss weapons, allowing you to transform them into much more devastating attacks. It's an incredible upgrade that gives X a ton more options in how you deal with level traversal as well as your boss battles. After getting through that area, you'll see a health upgrade that expands your health bar, but it's virtually inaccessible now. Well, that is unless you've already defeated Chill Penguin by now. See, if Chill Penguin isn't there to regulate the cold in his area, it causes that chill to spread and has quite the transformation to Flame Mammoth's stage, turning all of the lava into ice, which makes this level considerably easier. Now you can get to the upgrade with ease, and that's not all that's here. If X explores this area, there's a third hidden item in the vicinity. You can make your way back from the top to discover an energy tank. These are capsules that can be filled up and used to fully rejuvenate your health bar, and you can collect 4 of these tanks and they're all refillable. allowing you to store up a ton of health. Now this can be crucial in close boss fights, giving you essentially 5 times the amount of health that you would normally have access to. Now these items are incredible to have and are scattered throughout the game, right along with the health upgrades. Now once you make your way through the level, whether it's frozen or molten, you'll reach another vastly different boss arena than what we're used to from the Mega Man series. This one is on a massive conveyor belt and is more than twice the size of other boss arenas. And here is where we meet Flame Mammoth. Now if you thought Sparkman Drill was massive, this guy is colossal. The sheer size makes Flame Mammoth daunting enough. But then once the battle starts, he's leaping all over the arena. Thankfully with the dash boots, X is able to outmaneuver the Mammoth. And if you've got Storm Eagle's Storm Tornado, it does a lot of damage and helps cut Flame Mammoth down in short order. And of course, beating Flame Mammoth gives you the Fire Wave that we saw used on Chill Penguin earlier. But now that Flame Mammoth has been taken down, it's time to move on to our next enemy. And this time, we're moving to the wild ride of a challenge in Armored Armadillo. His level is a blast. From the start, you're on rolling platforms blazing through the stage. There's a few sections like these, but flying past the enemies and crushing them as you speed on is an absolute adrenaline rush. For years, this was my favorite level to play just because of the speed that you pick up here. You're in the mines, and this level has a few surprises, letting you catch another energy tank and the level's health upgrade respectively. But up until years later, I had no idea just how incredible of a surprise that this stage was truly hiding. Toward the boss gate, you'll find yourself back on a rolling cart, speeding through and being launched through the air across a chasm to the boss door. There's so much action here on the screen that it tends to result in slowdown. But if you time a dash jump just right, you can reach an upper platform above the boss door. Now when I was a kid, I always felt like there had to be more to it, because this area was just empty and it was there for what seemed like no reason. So I didn't realize what it was back then. I only learned years later that I was on the right path. See, if you've collected everything else, defeated all of the bosses, and you come back here, you can leave or die multiple times after you reach that ledge, and eventually you'll see another capsule. And here, we see Dr. Light with a headband on, and he gives you the Hadouken, reused special attack from the Street Fighter series. Now this makes no sense at all to this game, but it was an incredible Easter egg, and this thing can one-shot pretty much anything. Quite the reward for being the diligent gamer and exploring the world the way that Capcom wanted you to. But now that we have that out of the way, we head inside and face Armored Armadillo. Now this rolling bastard has a pretty simple pattern, but the fast movement always made it feel like a real fight to me. He hits like a truck if you get in his way, leaving you to scale the wall and dash around to avoid his rolling attack. But if you've got the electric spark, it will go above and beyond in wrecking AA here. This blast will jolt through him and blow off all of his armor, taking away his ability to block attacks. It also does massive damage, making this fight much easier. And once you've beaten Armored Armadillo, it's time to take a swim as we go after Launch Octopus. This is a mostly underwater level. He's in a deep sea facility. Now there are boats on the surface and plenty of enemies on the lower levels, including submarines and mechanical serpents. This level also has one of the cooler secret areas. where you can take down one of the ships at the surface of the water and it will crash down, destroying the level below, allowing you to access another hidden area where you can then ride around and attack one of these big sea serpents, which hides another health upgrade. This stage's underwater physics completely change the way you traverse the level, and it really makes it stand out from the rest. And once you get through this unique stage, you'll face Launch Octopus. He flies all over this boss arena and fires off missiles as he tries to blow you out of the water. Taking him on is one of the more challenging bosses in the game, with his weakness being the rolling shield that you get from Armored Armadillo. Now this is a fun battle with just enough challenge to help you get ready to take on pretty much anything in the game. And once the octopus falls, we can move on to scale the tower and face Boomer Kuwanger. Here you start at the base of the tower, making your way through and taking on all the enemies that are set up to guard Boomer Kuwanger. It's a really simple stage, and while I haven't mentioned it much before, I feel like it's a great time to start discussing the incredible soundtrack to this game. As you've been hearing, these tracks are high energy, each one attuned to draw the right emotion and set the scene for their stage. Chill Penguin's music had a tone that could give you a feeling of being in the cold. Armored Armadillo's song was frantic and high octane, representing the high-paced rolling sections of the level. Here, this is much more subdued and it helps to set the tone for the stage. I don't know why, but this one always felt more serious to me than the other stages. And once you make your way up to the top of his tower, you take on probably the most human looking of the Mavericks in this game. Boomer Kuwanger is creepy. He phases in and out and he's hard to hit. However, if you've got his weakness, which is the homing torpedo you get from Launch Octopus, you can fire these things off and they will track him down and completely negate his phasing. Collecting his weapon, the Boomerang Cutter, also adds some secrets that I intentionally skipped until now. While my personal favorite of the Maverick weapons is the Storm Tornado, I have to admit that the Boomerang Cutter may be the most fun to use in two of the boss battles. This weapon is the weakness for Sting Chameleon, but unlike the other weapons, it also has the ability to do far more than weaken one boss. Now, if you've got the cutter and you take on Flame Mammoth, you can use it to slice off his trunk, taking away his ability to shoot fireballs, but even more so than the mechanical damage, you just slice the trunk off of a mammoth. And that's not even the wildest thing that this cutter can do. If you use the Boomerang Cutter on Launch Octopus, you can take away his spinning attack by literally slicing off all of his tentacles. It's not the most damaging attack to him, but it turns this guy into a pushover as you cripple his most dangerous attack. I remember playing this as a kid and not knowing what all the weaknesses were, and when I learned about this attack, I was blown away. I believed for the longest time that this was his weakness, not even trying the rolling shield from Armored Armadillo until years later. But once you've taken him down, there's only one more Maverick to deal with, so we're going after Sting Chameleon. This is a forest level, moving through the woods and facing insects, birds, lumberjacks, and more. Now it is a fun level, but can have its own transformation if you come here after you've taken out Launch Octopus. See, taking down the octopus will lead to flooding, and this map shows the impact as it's partially flooded out now. The biggest way that this changes things, of course, is that there's a hidden section that's nearly impossible to clear, but if you use the charged shotgun ice in the water, you can just make the jump. But if you choose to climb higher rather than dive at this part of the level, you can get to a hidden mini-boss, a rotund, claw-armed brute. But once you take him out, you learn that he has been guarding the final light capsule. This one gives you the body armor, which reduces damage dealt to you by half. Now that really is a necessity moving forward, but it shouldn't be too important on most of the regular Maverick levels. For me, especially as a kid, the look of X here was far more important than what the power-ups actually did. I just wanted to look cool and be like Zero. All these upgrades brought X up to the level where his look was on level with Zero's, at least in my opinion. And as we continue through this level, we get more ride armor and move through some swampy areas before we finally reach Sting Chameleon. Now this guy slinks all over the stage, throwing spikes and raining them down from the ceiling. And while you could argue this one with me, I believe that his boss weakness makes him the most pathetic of all the Mavericks. See, if you have his weakness, the boomerang cutter, you can fire this up at Sting Chameleon for massive damage, but on top of that, it also sends him flying to the ground. And it almost makes me feel sorry for him when you get into a pattern where you just keep knocking him down like he's nothing and toying with him, as Sting Chameleon is desperate to get up and fight. I feel like I'm being unfair every time I use this attack on him, like I'm bullying him. He looks so pathetic as he just keeps trying to get back up and leap onto the wall. And the thing is, he's not even that difficult, so this kind of feels especially cruel. But if you want to imagine X as a merciless angel of death to the Mavericks, this is one way to absolutely savor that victory. But now, we've gotten through the Mavericks and it's time to move on to the next stage of the mission. Once the final Maverick is disposed of, you get a scene with X and Zero. Zero is quite impressed with how X has grown, but they have to focus on their real target, standing not far from Sigma's fortress. It's time to head inside and take on the evil leader of the Mavericks, who's threatening all of humanity. As a kid, I thought of video games as just something fun to pass time. I didn't think a lot about the depth of story or character development because I'd never experienced that in a game. This was the first time that I noticed real growth, seeing X's energy bar growing with each of the enhancements and with the new armor giving him new powers. You get to watch X grow from a self-conscious, reluctant warrior into a powerful and confident hero. X has shown himself that he can overcome the enemy and he is ready to storm in and save the day. I love the hero's journey here, and though he hasn't encountered a ton of hardship, well, at least not through the gameplay that we see yet, he's grown and it was an impactful journey for me to experience as a kid. See, back then, I was a kid with a lot of issues. I was bullied at school and felt isolated from others. I wanted to be strong, I wanted to be confident, but I wasn't. But when I put in Mega Man X, it was an escape. I was able to put myself in the shoes of a hero, which is what I think a lot of games do for kids. Now I know I'm not the only one who desperately wanted to go on an adventure or to be a hero. And through Mega Man X, now I was on the brink of saving the world from Sigma. Of course, after you beat the 8 Mavericks, you can still go back and replay their levels. So if you forgot or missed anything, it's easy to go back and explore and find everything. But now, we're ready to rush in. The Mega Man series always had its boss castles for Wily, but Sigma's fortress felt different. I was always a little sad that we didn't get the big image of the fortress, but we also weren't able to just head in through the front door. We start off outside of the fortress, taking on enemies that are stationed there to protect this place from outsiders. These enemies would have been nightmares at the start of the game, but X has so much more power now and experience. You make your way up and you enter through an opening in the fortress, battling your way inside before being stopped by Vile again. But this time, Zero rushes ahead to deal with Vile. X follows behind, but when he enters the next room, you can hear the battle taking place, and something doesn't sound right. X rushes on ahead until he finds the two. Vile has won and Zero is captured. Things are looking really bad here. Zero may have been a match for Vile, but that ride armor he is in makes him basically indestructible. X challenges him again now, and despite being much stronger than before, Vile gets the better of X again. He sets him down and prepares for the killing blow when Zero overrides his own circuits, overpowering the electrical field that he's trapped in, and leaps onto the ride armor before self-destructing. Zero sacrificed himself to save X, flung off screen in the explosion. This moment was an absolute shock as a kid when I first played this game. But there's no time to think about Zero just yet. We've still got to deal with Vile. X powers up, breaking free of the energy field and returning to full power before facing Vile again. This time, without his armor, Vile is vulnerable, and despite being a frantic battle, he proves to be no match for the powered up X. Once Vile has been defeated, X rushes to Zero, finding his friend laying there destroyed and dying. Zero is damaged beyond repair. He sacrificed his life to save X. It's a harrowing moment, and for me, was my first time really experiencing death in a video game. I'd never seen a character that I cared about die like this before in a game, and this feeling that I had way back then still lingers when I think about it. This void. Seeing the mighty Zero as he gives his final words of encouragement to X before perishing is a moment that took this game to another level. There's a sense of loss from here on out. Zero fades away and X is alone. Now the fate of the world is riding on X alone to defeat Sigma. You move forward through the fortress, still a bit numb from what you just went through, before running into the first of the round 2 bosses. See, in the classic series during the Wily Fortress, you'd be faced with a boss rush stage, where you get to use all of your powers and knowledge from the game to take on each of the bosses in a row. It was a way to pad out the game, but also usually not too much trouble since you had the weaknesses for each boss. In Mega Man X, the bosses each show their faces again, but they're spread out, waiting along the path to face X one more time. And the first one you come to is Boomer Kuwanger. The round 2 for these guys is the same as they are earlier, so if you equip their weaknesses, you can just shred these bosses. But by this time, you may decide to just take them on with the X-Buster as well. It's entirely up to you. In the game, I always thought that Boomer here was one of the harder bosses, but once he goes down, we only have to travel a little further before running into one of the most frustrating enemies I have ever encountered in any Mega Man game. This spider has killed me more times than probably any enemy in the Mega Man series. It drops in a completely random pattern and will throw out small spiders as well, making traversing the entire boss arena much more dangerous. There are some tracks that show up to help you somewhat predict the spider's movement, but it's still a pain as it can fly down and smash into you hard. And the lower its health gets, the faster this thing moves, so the intensity continues to build throughout the entire battle. And I'll say right here, this is the hardest of the Sigma Fortress bosses. However, if you stick with it and you're able to eventually predict the path that the spider is going to take, you can get past it and move forward. But now you're officially in Sigma's Fortress. It's time to really get moving. Fortunately, after you take on each of the Sigma Fortress levels, you're able to go back and face the prior levels again, which is great if you realize that you missed a secret or if you need to go back and top off your healing tanks. But now, it's time to move on. The second Sigma stage isn't too tough. More of the same really, but after a few moments, you'll run into Chill Penguin. This guy is still the easiest Mega Man X boss. Possibly the easiest Mega Man boss, period. You get through him and you move in deeper, getting a chance to take on some ride armor again, as you can catch its pilot off guard. And after that, it's a climb. Both ways can be extremely frustrating if you try to rush. But then, once you get past that, we reach some open air as we're about to go back and do battle with Storm Eagle. Now, he's still an easy boss, but he's one of the coolest looking Mavericks in the entire X series, so I kind of give him a free pass here. After Storm Eagle falls, we move back inside and climb higher, but it's only another short jaunt before we reach the second Sigma boss. This one is pretty easy, but one slip could end the battle immediately if you hit the spikes. The eyes are the weakness here, and you have to stick to the walls when the room closes in. I always enjoyed this boss, and the technique of dodging the nose thing will definitely come in handy later. Now, once you've defanged this entire wall-encompassing boss room, it's back to the main menu for a moment before we move on to the third Sigma stage. Within less than a minute, we're into the next boss. Stage 3 counts as more of a traditional boss rush too. You've got Armored Armadillo, who is always fun to take on. Then just climb a bit further before you reach Sting Chameleon. Now, I feel bad about it, but just go to the cutter and make him as helpless as you did before, and then you can just plow through the Chameleon and keep on going. This is really more of a padded boss rush as you just move through the tiny chambers, without much going on in between them. Now it's time to freeze Sparkman Drill in another super cheesy battle. I mean, unless of course you want to take him on for real. But either way, after he falls, we've now cleared 3 bosses before moving into what is clearly about to be Launch Octopus. It's a good time to keep the cutter out and make this battle much easier. He is still a fun boss by this time, but this is also a level where fatigue can really start to wear in. Although I have to say, as a kid, I was captivated. I knew that each boss brought me closer to the final showdown, as I finally get a chance to avenge Zero. From here, we move on to Flame Mammoth, and he is again in a big stage with a moving floor. He's just what he was before, which is still a fun boss battle, and right after he falls, we get to face the third of these special Sigma bosses. This is a 2-part machine that will smash you up if it gets the chance. This thing is reminiscent of the earlier Wily bosses from the old games, which is a nice nostalgic feeling, even if the graphics here make it look far less goofy than the Evil Doc's robots ever looked. Now, we're into the final stage. This is it. X starts out at the bottom of a long, narrow tower. There's enemies that you can take down here if you choose, or if you need to stock up and replenish your health. But this stage is all about moving on to the final showdown with Sigma. When you reach the top, it's dark. Sigma and his hound are there waiting for you. Sigma commends X on reaching him before letting him know that he's going to let his pet take him out. Sigma's going to be watching and waiting. At this point, Sigma refers to X as a betrayer, showing again just how warped his thinking has become before this battle begins. Now this dog can deal a lot of damage, but his pattern does help get you ready for Sigma. He jumps around and spits fireballs and does a lot of damage on any impact, but this is an absolutely approachable boss. Once he falls, Sigma shows back up and pulls out a lightsaber. And I don't know if the game in the manual calls it something else or not, but that's clearly what this is. After that, he rushes into battle, jumping up the walls as he tries to get in and smash X. Now, if you lose the pattern, he can deal massive damage. But if you can study his pattern and show some perseverance, you can take out Sigma. Now when he falls, his head comes off of his body and remains on the floor. But clearly, we're not done yet. A machine from the wall reaches down and picks up the head and grafts it onto a massive wolf that has been in the background the entire time. Now the true final boss battle with Sigma begins. The only way to take Sigma down is to get to the top and hit his head. And while I think this is probably one of the easiest games in the Mega Man franchise, this is a boss fight that truly lives up to the hype. Sigma is an absolute beast, and this one defeated me countless times, but eventually you can get there, taking down the mighty Sigma, which triggers a self-destruct on his fortress. Sigma is beside himself. He can't believe that he lost to X, having known X only to be a lower level hunter. He shows genuine shock, as if you were the evil one who betrayed him. But then he falls. From there, we cut to X back on the mainland as the floating Sigma fortress falls into the sea. Now, remember, on the way into the fortress, we had to climb flying platforms, which does add to the nature of this being a floating fortress. And from here, I'm just going to read the closing dialogue. The war has ended for now, and peace has been restored. But those who sacrificed themselves for victory will never return. Exhausted, X gazes at the destruction he helped cause and wonders why he chose to fight. Was there another way? Standing on the cliff, the answers seem to escape him. He only knows that he'll fight the Mavericks again before he finds his answers. How long will he keep on fighting? How long will his pain last? Maybe only the X-Buster on his hand knows for sure. So here we are. The game is over. We're in the credits now. X has saved the world, but we know that there are many casualties, and there's doubt on this truly being the end. We see X making his way back home here, moving along the highway before eventually cutting to the staff credits behind the game. Mega Man X is an absolutely incredible game, arguably the best of the entire Mega Man franchise. Now, at the end of the credits, Sigma shows back up and gives a warning to let us know that this is not the end. Somehow, Sigma lives on. The war is only beginning. But that's for another day. This video was just looking at the start of this spin-off franchise. I'd love to come back and do the rest of the series eventually, but for now, it's about time that we wrap this up. Mega Man X is one of my favorite games from my early childhood. It's a brilliantly crafted game that laid the groundwork for an entire series. With X, they took everything great about classic Mega Man and they built on that foundation to give us a new hero for a new generation. Anybody who has played through the entire X series knows that the finish was a far cry from where this game actually started. But this entry in the series knocked it out of the park from day one. I'm sure I'll be coming back to this series again and again. But for now, we'll close the first chapter on the Mega Man X series. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. Please drop a comment and tell me about your experiences with this game too. I'd love to hear them. But for now, I'm the Unhinged Gamer, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.